Back again.
Let's gallery view. Okay. Hi, everybody. Some familiar faces. Thank you for all the New Zealanders who are staying up to listen.
We will give everyone another minute to pop in before we get started.
Okay, very silent. If you would like to put into the chat where you are watching from, that would be great, just so we can see what our reach is. So thank you. Okay. Over to you, Robin.
We're ready to get started. Okay, so welcome everyone. This is exciting because this is the first of our type talks, and we're starting with 9. But before we get started, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands that we're joining from across Australia and pay my respects to elders past and present. I also acknowledge the Maori people of Aotearoa, New Zealand, and extend that respect to all First Nations people with us today. So our first type talk, starting with type 9, is presented by type 9, Valdemar, also known as Val. And Valdemar, I'll give a bit of an introduction for everybody. He's a coach and Enneagram practitioner, double certified in Enneagram and Tri-type, with training grounded in the original lineages of Oscar Ichazo and Claudia Naranjo, through Catherine Chemick-Favre. He works with individuals, couples, and groups through tri-type typing, relationship coaching, business workshops, and presentations. His work supports people to better understand their patterns and develop greater awareness, compassion, and integration in both personal and professional contexts. His approach is grounded, exploratory, and oriented toward helping people work with rather than against their natural patterns. With a background spanning architecture, web development, emergent systems, and Zen Shiatsu bodywork, Val brings a unique integrative perspective to human development. His work explores how patterns organize themselves through movement, perception, and personality, bridging Western psychology and philosophy with Eastern medicine and contemplative traditions. And at the center of his work is Forms of Intelligence, his coined framework for understanding how underlying organ-based patterns of intelligence give rise to distinct inner world experiences. And he's currently writing a book on this work. Val serves on the board of the Enneagram that we're all joining here with today. We've had him as our treasurer, which has been really wonderful. And he's also on the board of the Shiatsu Therapy Association of Australia. So we're really lucky to have you, Val, and I'd like to hand over to you to take us away.
Thank you. I'll share my screen. So if you'd like to just pin me for a second. Okay. Assume everybody can see that. Excellent, thank you. Okay, so thank you very much, Robin, for the introduction. So I'll be exploring the inner type 9, which is, I think, a first for me in my experience of any course I've done or any presentation, because normally whether they start with 8 or they start with 1. So it's nice to actually be starting with a 9 and not having to wait to the end. Yeah, so I'll be covering presence, purpose, and the pattern of forgetting self. Um, as Robin mentioned, I'm also a treasurer on the board. So I also just like to say that I'm presenting from Melbourne. Now I'm on the unceded lands of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, and I acknowledge them as the traditional custodians of this land. I pay my respects to elders, past, present, and emerging. And I also extend the respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples and to the Maori as the Tangata Wana of Aotearoa, New Zealand. Um, so, so first, um, given that it's type 9, I'll be focusing very much on 9. I might touch upon the other numbers very, very briefly, but it'll be very much focused on type 9. So the Enneagram, I came across it 6 years ago, just as COVID was kicking off. So it was an interesting time for me. So deep dived and yeah, so I kind of discovered that the Enneagram for me is effectively a model or a tool that for transformation, transforming suffering and self-defeating behavior into life-enhancing personal empowerment. So that's kind of the aspect of the gut type in terms of providing the power. In terms of the head side of things, it's the wisdom of the Enneagram reveals 9 distinct views of reality. And each of those are obviously valid in their own right. And given that I'm a 9, I'll also look at the other side and saying that they're also invalid, but they're all valid from the perspective of that each of us have got that subjective reality, which is good. The gift of the Enneagram is that it enriches and sustains connection with others because it gives a better understanding of what the others are potentially experiencing, their inner world, and potentially their suffering as well. And I mean suffering in terms of whether they're coming from a low side of their Enneagram type. I mean, if they're coming from their healthy side, then there's nothing to worry about, and someone obviously to enjoy and experience their good side. So this, for me, was the Enneagram was opened up as I look at it, an enjoyable, lifelong journey of discovery. And as you can see, I'm very young, so I've got many years to enjoy it, and I look forward to it. So, so the Enneagram is a model for self-discovery. Each type accentuates a facet of our human nature. The nice aspect of the 9 is that it can experience all those individual facets, but is obviously, like all of us, is blind to its own nature. And that is the thing which tends to be quite elusive with the 9. So the Enneagram models a kind of a map of each of us in our asleep state. And that in our sleep state, we all think our reality is real, but actually it's just a subjective reality. The map enables each of us effectively to orientate ourselves relative to each other, which is great because then we can see how we're different and how we are the same. And through that, we can hopefully become awake to what, as Ichazo would name, is sort of the absolute reality. So for any type 9, basically it reveals the pattern of self-forgetting, how everybody forgets themselves and how the 9 forgets itself. And it does so because it's asleep to itself being asleep. And that's one of the beautiful things I've discovered as a type 9 is when I eventually wake up to what I'm doing, then I can actually start engaging I use the word in life, in reality. So the Enneagram as a process. I look at it as two ways of looking at it. We've got the beginning and end cycle, the 9. It starts off from 9 in terms of the development of life. So it's like newborn coming into the world, and then it goes around 1, 2, 3, 4, all the way around to eventually where you get to 8, which is becoming kind of like an adult self-authority, and that 9 becomes kind of integrating wisdom, and eventually kind of death. But also the aspect of 9 is it's the end of a cycle and beginning of a new cycle. So it's a continual cycle of events through life. Things start, and hopefully, which is the difficulty for 9s is sometimes to finish them, is to finish off that cycle in order to be able to start the next cycle. On the other side, it becomes a bit of a hero's journey, the idea of as I experienced, the kind of the dark night of the soul, which was effectively going backwards and kind of undoing all the uh, aspects of me, which I found difficult because it was unlearning what I thought was reality to eventually come back to 9 and be able to then go, oh, now I know I found myself, and therefore I'm able to be my true self. So the aspect of 9s is the loss of presence and agency. There's a tendency to put themselves last, put others first, put others people's agendas first, and as a result of that, um, which on 9s they don't tend to sort of worry too much about that because they kind of feel that they'll eventually come around to it, or one day it will be my turn, and eventually, everything will be fine. However, that usually takes either a long time or it never happens. And that's where the frustration and the suffering starts occurring for 9s because their needs are not being met. And so there can be occasions where uh, something relatively innocuous, such as, let's say, children demanding, no, they don't want jam on the sandwich, they want peanut butter. And before you know it, there's a jam sandwich sliding down the wall because you've had it up to there. And you've been very forgiving and very flexible, but somehow it's the straw that breaks the camel's back. So that's a kind of an example of where a 9 can persevere for a very long time, and it's kind of normal. We don't, in a way, get upset by it, except when we kind of just had enough. So that's where the idea of we have a loss of presence and agency. We don't take action when we should be taking action. Oscar Ichazo's trialectics talked about integral logic of cycles. The idea is that by starting and completing cycles, we become much more awake to ourselves, and therefore become more a sort of a process of becoming to sort of understanding what the absolute reality is. One of the things that I've consciously left out of the Enneagram symbol are the inner lines, and that's something which is not kind of, I'm not going to focus on those in this presentation, but I'll talk about in another presentation. So, instinctual triads. This is what Oscar Inchazo basically grouped the respective types under, or points as he called it then, or ego types. So the 9 falls under the sort of the green one here at the top, which is the conservation instinct. So it's a very much a historical ego. Things get embedded somatically into the body. We remember things that happened a long time ago based on the feeling, the sensation that we had in the body. So we can recollect events, discussions, people by where we were, and that gives us that kind of spatial orientation to what happened in what sequence, and that way we're able to, in a practical way, exist in the world. So that's how 9 is. It's very much a being group, along with the 8 and the 1, and 8 and 1 are kind of variations of the 9. 9 holds that space in the middle. The qualities of so for a gut type, or in this case, sorry, gut type, is sort of the historical ego it talks about is how am I? So the 9 is very much based on comfort, being at ease, no conflict or minimal amount of conflict, and having everything that they need to hand. So when issues arise, they try to avoid them in some way, or they try to be resistant because they don't want the change. It's the disruption to them. They can be stubborn. At times, they can have just so many other things on their mind that they just simply forget things, not out of spite, but just simply because they've just got so many other things which are preoccupying them. And nines can be easily distracted. Even today, I was laughing at my situation where I was going to put my socks away, but somehow I ended up eating chocolate somehow, and then I was on the way to put on the kettle, but then for some reason I was rummaging around in the fridge. And so there's all these various things which a nine sets out to do and then gets distracted along the way. So if that ever happens to a nine that you're aware of, please be patient. They will eventually get around to what they set out to do. Um, Nines, as Claudio Naranjo mentioned in terms of in his book Character and Neurosis, is that he kind of saw them as pleasant types, which they are, of course, because I'm biased, and the it's because they bury their problems, and their problems is effectively that they forget themselves, so they put other people first, and that's why they are pleasant. Um, why do we put other people first? Um, Partially because we kind of almost, if you imagine like a child learning to ride a bike, we kind of feel that once we get them to ride the bike, they'll be okay. They can ride by themselves. And then I can go back to what I was doing before. And that's the kind of, at least for me, that's the feeling as a nine. When I approach most things in life or people, I kind of help them, hoping that they'll just simply be able to then ride their bike without further um, needs. And it can be a little bit disconcerting if the person's constantly coming back and not quite getting it. And that for a nine sometimes can be a little bit like I said, disconcerting. Um, on the other hand, a positive aspect is because they do put other people first, they're able to easily distract themselves or go into their own mind. They are quite diligent in terms of the work they do that they apply themselves to. They can persevere with very tedious tasks, also repetitive tasks. They can endure things for years, like I said, until that, that straw that breaks the camel's back. And they can easily sort of keep themselves amused in various ways. And that kind of is as I will add here, in the sense of intelligence, in terms of depending on what kind of instinctual type they are. So, to honor Inchazo's copyright, Naranjo renamed the instinctual triads the centers of intelligence. So, the conservation instinct became the gut center, which was very much involved with resources, health, and self. And I've got their acceptance. I think that might be a typo there, so I've got to look at that one again. So apologies for that one. And I've put the other ones there, which I didn't. I can just go back briefly. So for the head types, we got the adaptation instinct of where am I, which is the practical ego. So it's very much a doing group to do with thinking. What do I need to do to be safe? Whereas for a gut type is, what do I need to practically do to be safe? Whereas in a relation instinct is who am I with? Am I appealing to my person who I or my group? What role persona do I have for that individual? So Claudio Naranjo um, gave the relation instinct to the heart center. So that's very much to do with attention, image, and kind of brilliance to effectively draw that appeal and get that acknowledgement from the significant other or others. Whereas for the head center, it's very much to do with groups, know-how, and the conduct that one has to have to get that reassurance that they are safe. So going back to the N-type 9, it's got a very much a qualities of earthiness, groundness, solidness, and ease because it's got its own authority. It's accepting of pretty much everybody. It's kind of very forgiving. It gives people the benefit of the doubt, gives them probably a few times. At the same time, like I said, it forgets itself. So if we go into the instinctual drive, so this is the sort of more primal quality of the gut, the social, and the heart side, which Naranjo gave the name self-preservation, sexual, and social. Um, Kind of imagine it almost like a computer operating system. So this is going on continuously, whether you're whether you know it or not. This is what's driving you 24-hour every day of of the year, and this is what gives you kind of attention, the focus, the joy, the satisfaction, um, and a sense of what gives you the fuel of interest. So for the self-preservation, it's again, it's to do with self-sufficiency and its survival. Gut types happy to be by themselves, happy to do their own thing. They don't have to ask anybody. They can keep themselves amused. For the sexual type, there's to do with connection with their significant other or others and having some kind of deeper, meaningful resonance with that particular partner. Whereas on a social level, it's more to do with social standing, belonging, and not being excluded. Social can also be antisocial, but still, even in an antisocial, you tend to be still residing in some kind of group on the whole. So you're always looking at belonging to the antisocial group. So the nine is pretty much a seeker in terms of all these. So there's the three types of seekers, which are based on the instinctual drives. So the self-preservation type focuses more on appetites. So it's not just food. It can be stamp collections. It could be hoarding TVs. That was my dad because he liked repairing them. But the problem with nines is that they sometimes take on too much and never actually complete things. So that was one of the things I remember. So appetites for a self-pres, for a sexual, I happen to be a sexual nine, so it's to do with symbiotic merging. So it's the idea of union fusion with the significant other. Although I have noticed that, I do that with everybody, and I prefer more kind of one-to-one interactions because I can actually interact with them on a much more meaningful way rather than a group where the energy is more split. Whereas social nines prefer to be like the group anchor, um, and being the kind of the rock. If there's turbulent water, they are the kind of the grounding for the rest of the group to sort of to be based around. So nines, when they are ahead of organizations like our very own Andre, it kind of gives the rest of the group to form around. Um, Barack Obama was also a nine. I think he was a social nine. So you can see the qualities that nines, even though they are quiet, they are very strong internally, and they are often difficult to move if they are stubborn, of course. So when we place each of these instinctual types underneath the enneatype, we therefore get instinctual subtypes. So I'll move on to the next one. I hope we're doing okay for time. So the instinctual stacking for myself is sexual, then it's self-pres, then it's social. So on the left side, it shows, the initial one is I've got here colored as pink, being the sexual side or the heart side. The gut self-preservation is green, which is kind of more bile gut colored. And the third one, which is blue, more watery air quality, which is the social. So that's kind of effectively the patterns, the order of how I interact in the world. I first go looking for some kind of interaction on a deeper level to merge with people. And when I don't set out to set up the mergers, it just happens to be that's what a sexual nine does. They just automatically do that because we just pick up on the energy and we match the energy of the other person. In order not to form any kind of dissonance. And by matching that energy, the other person can hopefully feel relaxed and at ease. If I'm not getting the sexual side of things, then I move to the self-pres. So an example might be if I go to some kind of party where I don't know anybody and everybody's in groups and it's difficult to sort of make that one-to-one connection with a person, then I would tend to sort of move towards the buffet because at least there's something to feed um, my fuel me effectively. And the one that was kind of underused for me prior to the coming across the Enneagram was the social, because I didn't understand that there was a thing called social. I thought it was just something that was people just had it, whereas I just sort of was more on the periphery. However, with the Enneagram, that's now, as you can tell now, I'm a treasurer, so I'm sort of throwing myself into social gatherings, social groups, because I know that's the part I need to sort of effectively balance my um, subtypes. So the next one is proportions. So at the moment, that's just an indicative kind of pie chart there for purposes of display. The predominantly it's going to be sexual, and then the next one is in terms of the next pie segment is how much of it is then in this case self-preservation, and finally how much is social. So with time, what I hope to do is balance them out so each of them are a third. So depending on the situation, I can move between sexual, self-pres, and social. I don't feel that I have to constantly rely on my number one subtype. I mean, it'll always be there, but it allows me to sort of develop my social side, for example. Um, and identifications which are much more nurture, the other two being more nature. So identifications are nurture, so how you've been brought up, the community you've grown up, and whether it's acceptable or not acceptable, whether you have had opportunity to explore those particular instinctual types that you lead with. In my case, it's positive, and my social was negative. It was underdeveloped. And sometimes you can have plus or minus, so equal, so that it's neither one or the other. In this case, it was negative. So moving to the center one, um, I'll start off on the right hand side because that's what I lead with. So it's the symbiotic merging. Um, and if that wasn't happening, I'll then have insatiable appetites. I mean, I do have insatiable appetites, but they kind of tend to be in terms of projects that I like, the more creative things that give me the energy. Again, this is more creative energy, which is what the sexual side does. It's the change element in all the types, and it's the one that's more creative and more willing to try things out for the sake of trying them out. So I've got a million and one projects on, which is another problem that nines tend to have, is they have millions of plates spinning. And the idea is try to, finish a project to start a new project, as opposed to adding yet another plate on top, and or another plate to spin to get something going. So that's something which I'm working on, and I hasten to add I'm improving. And finally, social, so a group anchor. So I see that's how I come across in social groups. When I do get myself involved, is that I become an anchor, that I give the kind of ability to give an all-round um, kind of input to the group, rein people in or encourage people. So the idea of giving them a balanced kind of options. So at the bottom, we've got the example of how I tend to sort of work. So the sexual 9 goes to to self-pres 9, then goes to social 9. If any of these, or should I say, if all of these fail me for any reason, then there's a tendency to effectively, suffer a degree of trauma, which in my case, when I was going through my situation, I kind of experienced my dark night of the soul, because everything which I had kind of relied upon disappeared. And that kind of effectively threw me in a way which I thought to myself, what's going on here? My reality, or in this case, subjective reality, suddenly disappeared. So I had to effectively find what was going on. Um, so I'll give you another example. So going a little bit into tri-type stacking. So the other previous one you had was subtype stacking. So now we're going to tri-type stacking. So in my case, I'm a 936. the reason why I kind of settled on a 9 was initially I thought because I was supposedly angry. I mean, the whole gut type is an anger center, but I thought I must be a 1. But I didn't have the defense strategy or core fears or the idealized image of a type 1. So I thought, okay, in that case, I must be an 8. But again, I didn't have the defense strategy, the core fears, or the idealized image of an 8. So the only one that remained was a 9, and then it all started falling into place. And I had that kind of aha moment, and felt like I was on an operating table, awake with everything inside me. Kind of, it's already been mapped. We know what your inner world is, and that was the kind of surprise, a pleasant surprise, because I like to know what's going on. But at the same time, I also discovered that I've got a heart center and I've got a head center, and this is how I act out in those respective centers. Um, I, as my kind of day job predominantly, I'm a sort of web developer. So I also contract. So I'm only as good as my last contract. So I've got to always be on the ball, always coming across, um, inverted commas, sort of perfect, doing a good job so that my contract I can get renewed. So that's my 3, the performance side to ensure that I can exist. uh, the 6 side comes into it in terms of being very good at problem solving. So that's how I kind of use that um, to um, to effectively keep my existence. So the 3 and the 6 for me are effectively like crutches, but I act from the 9 point all the time, and just using the 3 and the 6 as and when required to ensure that my comfortable world continues on. So if we go to the bottom one we've got the 2 arrows moving across. So in this case, as I had in the previous one, is symbiosis, union, and merging is what I'm looking at. But at the same time, I'm also a sexual 3, so I'm looking at the masculine, feminine role, the ideal. What is the how do I come across? Do, am I effectively portraying that side of being definite, being um, uh, appealing? Not so much because I don't lead as a 3, I lead as a 9, but in terms of those qualities of looking attractive, etc., etc. In terms of the 6, sexual 6 is very much sort of strength and beauty to make sure I've got slightly something edgy about me. Um, and as you may have already seen or heard from my presentation, I'm a little bit provocative here a lot of times, sometimes pushing it, laughing at myself, which is a type 6 kind of thing. Um, but the quality of why I lead with a 9 is because I don't take myself too seriously. So whereas if I was leading with a 3, perfection and making sure I was first and got the best result would be important. But as a 9, as long as I'm not at if I'm at the top, it's okay. Although sometimes it depends on the situation of not wanting to stand out, because then there can be animosity. Um, at the same time, I don't want to be the last person. So the 9 likes to be somewhere in the middle, preferably not noticed, which, yeah, most 9s will probably understand that feeling. So if I'm not getting my sexual 936 met, I then fall to my self-pres 936. So I've already mentioned the appetites, the substitutes, the collecting. So I'm looking for security, accumulating, trying scarcity. So in this case, I would be going into becoming a bit of a workaholic, making sure that the projects are done, they're done perfectly, there's no mistakes, so that there's no opportunity for anybody to say you're not doing a good job. And that kind of matches with the self-pres 6 side, where I don't want to upset anybody, so I'm always warm to them. I listen to, I try to take on their concerns in order not to get rejected. So that's how the self-pres 936 works. And if that fails, or in this case, what I'm now looking at is how to expand on my social 936, because that's the bit that's undeveloped, which is more participation, accepting the prestige, the the introductions, the achievements, becoming a treasurer, being appreciated for that, which normally I would shy from that. So in this case, I'm willing to listen to it, thank for it, thank in this case Robin for the introduction, because that would have been something uncomfortable for me 10 years ago. Now I'm much more at ease with it. And the sixth side is very much to do with being dutiful, fellowship, and sort of ensuring there's kind of cohesion in the group. Which previously I would move between groups. I wouldn't, there was lots of infighting. I wouldn't show that interest of trying to resolve it. But now, knowing that this is what the quality of a type 9 is, I can actually get involved with it, knowing, and also with the Enneagram, also know of, these are the concerns, these are the issues, these are the conflicts that people are experiencing, and be able to mediate that. So the Enneagram for me is, as you're all aware, and no doubt experience yourselves, is a fantastic tool to help with that. Looking at the time. Okay, so the egoic patterns. So we obviously all know about passions. Oscar Chazo also brought in fixations, which is the mental preoccupation that we have. And studying with Catherine Chernik-Farber, she also added the convictions, which was more of the gut. I mean, she's a type 8, I'm a type 9. But she already kind of was exploring the idea of having, given that the Enneagram is a trilectic system, there should be some kind of gut thing. There must be. So it turns out it's the must bit. So for type 9s, we must be comfortable. That is the number one thing. We've got to be comfortable, or be comfortable very soon after being discomfort in some discomfort. So the defense strategy of the 9 is narcotization. So it's effectively numbing out. So we'll numb ourselves out by binge watching, eating food, collecting things, throwing ourselves into reading books or many books. All these kind of things can potentially be ways of numbing ourselves out. The passion, which is known as sloth or acedia, is not so much the animal, or being necessarily lazy, because often 9s are actually very hardworking. In fact, Oscar Chazo was a social type 9. So thanks to him, we've got the Enneagram of personality. But the nature of the sloth is avoidant, to avoid it in terms of trying to avoid conflict, and therefore becoming dependent on the other person to sort of be the tempo or the mood of the situation. So that's the problem with the 9's passion, is that they forget themselves and effectively allow the other person to make the decisions, because the idealized image of a 9 is I'm easygoing and accepting. So a good example, which you may have experienced with your friends, if you're not type of 9, is you're deciding where to go lunch, and there's always the 9 which decides to be, hey, I'm easy, I'll go with whatever you want. And that is one of the things where maybe you can kind of ask a 9, what would you like if you had the opportunity, even if it's the same thing that you went to yesterday? Would you want to do that again? 9s will be happy with that, and appreciate that. And finally, the fixations. So the fixations, as I mentioned, is the mental side of things. So indolence. So this is the avoidance of discomfort. So the reason why is they fear basically conflict. Conflict, even though 9s are happy with conflicts. I mean, as a sexual 9, I would easily get into conflict if they're on certain situations. But when it comes to conflict, there's obviously a loss of harmony, and if the other person isn't a gut type, it can actually cause a rift. I've grown up with gut types, so we literally would not say fall asleep, we would go to sleep on it, and the next day would be a new day, a new slate, and you carry on as if nothing had happened. So the problem that 9s face is they tend to be overlooked. So the good thing is to get them involved, um, and and if they don't have the answer straight away, for them to think about it and come back with what they would like. And often they do. Um, as a nine, I can potentially go to the doctors. I can list all the things that I've got that I might have issues in, and then I leave the doctors and I think, oh, I actually forgot to mention the most important thing, which is why the reason I actually went to the doctors in the first place. So that's the problem that nines can face is they can bury things, and they can bury things for a very long time, um, and forget about them. So the so how do we get around this? So as Oscar Chazo mentioned, he goes, we can't get rid of our egos. We can't kill it. Um, because your ego is listening, as Tom Condon mentioned. So you've got to obviously whisper it. But the thing is, with ego reduction is acknowledge that it's there. I mean, you can't replace the ego because what are you going to replace it with? You've got just talking about the leading type, which other type would you want to replace it with? We wouldn't know what necessarily what the motivation, what the core fears, defense strategy, and the idealized image of that type would be, and we'd end up just having inverted commas, they're suffering. So the whole point is to kind of have an ego reduction. Don't let your ego take uh, the control of the situation. Um, so what do we
Val,
do? Yeah, sorry, go for
oh,
it.
it might not be a good time to jump in, but we've had a question in the chat. So when you've got time, it's
Is
what
it is it something that you think it's important for me to explain now, or do you think?
probably not right now. No, no,
Okay,
go
all
ahead.
right. We'll have a look at the question and we'll either add it to the presentation, or we'll take it offline after the presentation, and for those who want to hang around. Okay. I apologize if I'm going fast. The neutralizing patterns. So to get this ego reduction, so we effectively we refer to the essential higher qualities, the holy divine aspects. So for the Enneagram Type 9, um, the three aspects are again following the aspect of the sort of tri-type that each of the respective triads has got its own action. So for the Enneagram Type 9, the holy action is holy charity. So it's getting involved and not, as we tend to do, is we don't from a high level, shall I say. The idea is, we don't get attached to it. We help out where we can, and but the main thing is also to not forget ourselves. So it's charity, but not just simply uh, unlimited charity. The holy virtue, sorry, should I say, is holy action. Aspects that nines tend to suffer with is that they will think or feel, um, or um, or sense something needs to be done at the time or be said, but they just pause a little bit too long, and then the moment passes, and then they'll think to themselves, I'll come around to it a little bit later. um, Sometimes it happens, sometimes it never comes around. And that's the whole aspect of the Holy Virtual, is to actually get engaged and say what needs to be said, um, and not let it pass. Because often what nines, as I've been told, what nines do say actually is meaningful to the rest of the group. And it does bring, again, some kind of stability and groundness to the conversations or the conflicts that happen to be happening. And the holy idea, which is the mental aspect, is love. To remember that regardless of how people are acting out, that deep down they are suffering in their own respective, obviously, Enneatype here, and that they can be forgiven even if they've done things to you. The idea being that they can still be accepted, that hopefully one day they'll actually see the error of their way, and actually, you can then, if you so wish, to be able to um, bring them back into your fold. But the idea is not to uh, forgive you. It kind of, the nines kind of love their neighbor, as is one. but they forget to love themselves. So the idea is they need to love themselves and respect themselves before they extend that to people that necessarily have hurt them. So even like the Stockholm syndrome is an issue, I think, of a nine. So so there's the person obviously, is completely forgetting themselves. So, sort of finishing off, I think, on this one, which is so Oscar Chazo kind of talks about the what do we have? The idea is having an engaged, unmovable conscious awareness. So it's one where we don't fall into our identity, we don't fall into our necessarily of who are what our type is and try acting out, but take it from a measured point of view, having the perspective and the strategy to avoid falling into that. Um, be, Being aware of it, but not being led by it. Let me just see what else I've got here. That was my last one. Yes. So, do you want to ask that question now, Robin, or whoever? You're on mute at the moment.
It was a question from Kate, and it
Yeah.
was wanting clarity on what trilectic means.
Trialectics. So Oscar Chazo was a philosopher very much interested in the existential questions of, you know, who am I? What am I doing in this world? And what is one's purpose? And the whole aspect of philosophy. So he'd studied things going back to because he actually worked in a library, but also inherited his uncle's library and an extensive esoteric library. So he researched and read, was very wide read as a social nine. And trialectics was his um, part of integral theory or integral logic, the idea of we had formal logic, he had dialectic logic, and his were talking about trialectic logic, that the idea being that it's to do with not I kind of paraphrase here. It's not just simply action, reaction, and integration. It's also the cycles. It's the cycle, the movement, the function of what actually comes out of that particular set of interactions. So, are you going up or are you going down in terms of a spiral? And hopefully, the idea is that through the Enneagram, we can see how we are I put it, nicely. We fool ourselves thinking that this is reality. It turns out, we're just tricking ourselves. Once we kind of see beyond that, the idea is that we can start going up the planes of consciousness, start to kind of work through our kind of dharma, using sort of the Buddhist term. Sorry, not Buddhist, the Hindu term, I think is correct, and Buddhist. So the idea being that we can actually work through the suffering, the trauma, the hurt that we've experienced through life, understand patterns, understand situations in the past, and be able to somehow make peace with that and be able to sort of integrate that back into our life. So the trilectic side is how I interpret it is very much to do with cycles. It's not a there is no, even though the nine is the beginning of the end, but it's the beginning and the end of, since whatever the Big Bang, that kind of the idea of things are going through cycles, things are changing, and there's always a new state, but it's just continual going around in a almost like the Buddhist wheel, of suffering. But the Enneagram gives us the ability to see why things are happening and be able to kind of step out of it and be able to not get caught up in that wheel. So hopefully that's kind of answered your question.
Thanks, thanks, Val. We've got a couple more.
Yeah.
Uh, Danny has a great question.
Shall I
Danny,
I'll go to gallery view just so that way I can see everybody.
uh, Danny, jump in if you would like to speak it out yourself.
Yeah,
But
maybe I'll just read out
yeah,
the question I wrote. Yeah.
for
Hello,
sure.
thanks, Val, for your
Hi,
presentation.
Danny.
Now forgive me, it's a long question.
Hmm.
During Belinda Gore's presentation this morning on the soul child, I don't know if you happened to catch it, did you?
I caught bits and pieces of it. Yes. Hmm.
She said something that really caught a lot of our attention. She said the passion of our heart point or the direction of integration is more fundamental to our inner work than that of our types. It's got a deeper hold on us. It's more true to who we really are. So that really, really caught my attention. And so for nines, that's deceit. And so I guess my question is, and it might be hard to answer it in the moment, because it is quite a complex idea, but how do you see this could play out for nines? What shapes could it take?
Yeah. The way I think it was my second slide, the idea that nines show how we're asleep to asleep. So we're all asleep to our respective types. I think what the three brings is the idea is how we deceive ourselves, thinking that we are who we are. And we how hard we hold on to that kind of reality of who we think we are, and this is me, this is for, taking the case of a three is it's to do the centers vanity. So the idea of who I am is what I do. It's the same thing like I do at work. I'm the web programmer. I do this. I do a package almost of how I sell myself, and that's effectively what a three does. Is how do you sell yourself? So and the three is deceiving themselves, thinking they are who they are. So it's a kind of a deception on that thing. But each of the types shows how we are effectively fooling ourselves.
Thanks.
So, so the
Yeah.
narcotization is sorry. The other was narcissism. I think was a
Yeah,
type
that's
three.
right. Yep.
So, so the for the nine, the way I interpret it was like how I deceive myself thinking that I am easygoing, etc. Which I kind of think I am, but I can see how I'm deceiving myself from the perspective of thinking things are going to actually get better. The whole point is when I was growing up, I think, oh, people are just going through their problems, they'll get them sorted and they'll be okay because that's how I used to be. But the reality is like, no, no, people are just going to be doing their own thing anyway. And the whole point, the Enneagram explains the reason why. So I've kind of accept that. So I'm not deceiving myself now that thinking that things are going to improve. The narcissism side of it is because nines are very altruistic, they put themselves last. I was thinking to myself, do I need to become more narcissistic to sort of put myself forward? But I'm thinking, no, no, no. I wouldn't want to be. If anything, I should actually place myself as equal. Maybe just a tiny bit being just in front, so not to forget myself. But the idea of being so for me, narcissism is not in my playbook at all. Unless someone tells me that I am, then in which case I'll look at it again. But yeah.
Yeah, thank you. I've just been thinking about it all day and thinking, yeah, okay, how's that playing itself out in my life? Particularly the deceit. I could understand that. I couldn't quite grasp narcissism either, but
Yeah.
maybe that's the the blind spot.
Yeah, I mean, if
Yeah.
I was a different tri type, I might be able to give you something more because I'm a 936. I'm already in
Yep.
that goldfish bowl. So that's the world I swim in. Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you, Danny.
Val,
Andre, I see your hand go up briefly.
we just have a question from Isabel in the chat, which is patiently waiting.
Oh
So
yeah,
maybe if
by all
we can
means,
jump
yeah.
in there and
I
then we'll
can't
get to
see
answer.
Isabel. Is she on the second screen?
I'm here. Hello. I guess by way of by way of context, I suppose. So my boyfriend is primarily nine. I'm
Hmm.
primarily I am eight. And I'm wondering like the best way of kind of relating to him and motivating him. Maybe my tendencies might come across as too strong or direct in a way that could be unmotivating. And there could be like a defense there to
Yeah,
anything that and it's not that I'm trying to get him to do what I want. It's more motivating him to live his best life. Um, so I was just wondering
yeah,
if you could give some insight in terms of like what what things that you should when everybody else is relating to you as a nine, what really doesn't work for you in terms of your um, in terms of how you are best motivated and how you best hear people, or what works well in terms of
Yeah, no, good question. Good
yeah.
question. Yeah. So, asking a nine what they want, they usually blank out. That's often the first thing, because no one really asked them that question, so it can throw them often. Um, I think a good thing is not expecting an answer there and then is one thing. It might be a good idea to maybe sort of brainstorm, any options, as I kind of mentioned, like with the case of like the doctors, it's like list everything, and then suddenly, 2 hours later, they actually put down the most important thing because they've just buried it so deep that they haven't actually thought about it recently, even though it might be that in their mind all the time. It's just become part of the wallpaper, that kind of thing. So that's an example. Obviously, knowing your type is also useful, and seeing the dynamics. Um, yeah, that would be the way I kind of look at it. I mean, hopefully that's kind of answered your question, but one of them would be not expecting necessarily an answer straight away, but make it such that um, all answers, any ideas are all positive and acceptable, and they can be discussed. Even the ones which are awkward, because if you don't start somewhere, then how can they come out into the open? And that's a nine will appreciate that.
No, that's really helpful. I know that I have a lot of impatience, and I know that I need to work on that. So that's a really helpful answer. Thank you.
Okay, thank you as well.
Did Andre, did you have a question?
Oh, I was more commenting on the narcissism. I think that the narcissism is in the shadow of the nine. If we think we're agreeable and easygoing, we deny our own anger or aggression, and the fact that we might be just as nasty as everybody else. And so I think that's the deceit too, that here I am being easygoing and agreeable and peaceful, and why can't everybody else be more like me, instead of acknowledging our own shadow.
Sure. I mean, as a sexual nine, there's a bit more frustration there, more pace to things, and wanting change and wanting things to happen. So, if I use the word not so much aggression, more anger, the idea of wanting to do things, get that energy out is more tends to be there anyway. So, but I don't see it as, from my perspective, in narcissism. Yeah. Any other questions? Alex.
Yes, so I'm just thinking about the way the structure is, where you could be a sexual, a social, or appetite type nine. Is that something that can change over time, even if you're not aware that you were one type and now you're a different type?
It's not so much that you change types, you just, because the way I look at it, I'll always be sexual first, but the idea is to make it 33.33% and have the other ones just as equal. So depending on the situation, I can move between them, as opposed to always, using like a hammer, everything is a nail. The idea is that no, this one needs a screwdriver, this one needs a pliers, etc., etc. So that's how the way to look at the subtypes is not to become too over reliant on one, but try to make them equal and also be more flowing between them. So the idea become much more undistorted.
Okay, yeah, because I would certainly say when I was younger, I had no social skills, and as I've grown older, they've obviously built. So I feel like I'm becoming more of that social anchor now than I was, I was younger. So I just, yeah, is that just changes in life that makes you find different coping skills?
Partially that, and also who you grew up with. If you had a family which was very sociable, outgoing, etc., then you kind of pick up the niceties, and how to talk with people, and it becomes kind of second nature. But you will prefer to be doing either self-pres or sexual. You might be doing social, but on a sexual basis, the idea of one-to-one conversation, as opposed to talking to a group, or holding conversation at the table, telling anecdotes, etc., which is more for type 7 type, unless you have a 7 in your tri type. A 9 would tend not to want to be the center of attention. Yeah. But,
Thank you.
you become more used to it, as if you want more for social 9. Yeah.
Wonderful.
I
you,
might
Alex.
just jump in because we've hit 8 o'clock, but Val has said that he's happy to take some more questions after the time. But I just wanted to honor the time and let everyone know that of course you're free to do what you need to do. And I'll also just take this opportunity to let everyone know that there's a stellar lineup for tomorrow. And the first in the day is 8 a.m. for Australian Eastern Standard Time, Parenting in the Enneagram with Tracy Tressida. And you can find all the other talks on the schedule on the website. So thank you everyone for joining us, and we'll continue with a question from Isabel, I think.
Yeah, this is actually from Richard. I know I've already had my question, but this is from Richard.
Yeah, my
Hi,
question
Richard.
to Val is I've got a very strong 8 wing because there was no Geneva Convention in the family I grew up in, no prisoners taken. And a lot of people think I'm an 8 because I've got a very big energy and I blast people as well. So I just wondered what your thoughts would be about that.
Interesting. Because I lean more towards the one side. So I also kind of, if I use the word don't take prisoners, but then that's also because I've got a 3 which wants to be efficient, doesn't want to waste time, wants to keep moving, get things over so that I can effectively return back to comfort. So in terms of the energy, the 9, when they get going, they get going. And there's nothing that can stop them. And they can keep on going for a long time. In my case, now that I've kind of come across the Enneagram, I'm literally kind of, it's I like an appetite. I'm hoarding. I'm literally eating everything I can potentially come across in order to become, that's my the seeker side, which is also the, I need to stop at some point in order to do other things. So, but the aspect of the energy, there's a lot of energy, and that's coming from the 8 side. So, and that gives the oomph, and when it's unlocked, it's I think it's a good thing. It just comes across maybe to other people as being too much. So that's the quality of the 8, too much, too this, too that. And it's, but with a 9, I can use the word, you can kind of get away with it to a degree because 9s are soft. They know how to couch things. And they don't come across over imposing in terms of physically. Not 8s kind of are oozing that energy and that presence. 9s kind of can easily come into the room and take up space, but they don't impose themselves. So that's kind of been my experience. I don't know if that's answered your question. So
Yes.
but what you can do is just allow other people to talk first, let them speak, and then think is it worth saying something now or not? Or do I have a conversation over coffee with them later on or something and think, this is how it came across to me, maybe sort of take it offline, but then, depends on also who they are as well, whether they like to have that kind of one-to-one or whether they prefer more of a group thing. So do you organize more of a group arrangement, allow everybody else to speak and then summate it? Because that's the good thing that 9s can do, is that they can take in everybody's point of view and they can kind of give a summary, or they can add yet something that somebody else hasn't considered.
That's very useful.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So
Silence. Okay.
are there any other questions, or there have been some insightful comments in the chat too. So thank you to everyone who's participated in the texting side.
Yeah. So if anybody wants to reach out to me, I find me on LinkedIn or become a member and send a message through the forum. Yeah. Thank you, Robin.
Thanks, Val, and thanks everyone. Really, really helpful talk for us all to understand 9s a little bit better. See you all tomorrow.
Good job, Val.
Thank you.
Nice one, Val.
Thank you.